The CIS droid army was the largest fighting force in the history of the galaxy, an amalgamation of the private droid armies maintained by a number of powerful megacorporations. But while anyone who's a Clone Wars fan is quite familiar with the droid army, not many fans know how the droid army was actually organized. What kind of units were droids divided into? Did they even have units or ranks? How similar was it to the Grand Army of the Republic? In this video, we'll be answering all those questions and many, many more.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
The military forces of the Confederacy of Independent Systems were a lot less coherent than the Republic's due to the nature of the Confederacy. The Separatists were always more of a movement than a centralized faction, and when the Clone Wars began, the CIS military was really just a coalition of hundreds of smaller forces. Droid armies like those of the Trade Defense Force, the Techno-Union Droid Army, the Commerce Guild Punitive Security Forces, the IGBC's Collections and Security Division, and the Corporate Alliance's Policy Administration Directorate were the most well-known, but there were also a number of planetary security forces and small private armies grouped in there as well. All of them had their own leaders and organizational systems, and these systems weren't compatible either. This kind of organized chaos was obviously unsuitable for a galactic scale military, and so when General Grievous became Supreme Commander of the CIS 5 months into the war, he made his own organizational system. All of the droid units were grouped together into the CIS droid army using an order of battle based on the Trade Defense Forces. Organic armies attached to the CIS military were allowed to keep their own internal organization systems, but the individual command structures of the various droid armies were thrown into the trash compactor, where they belonged. Grievous's system was satisfyingly logical. Divisions were based primarily on the carrying capacity of the Confederacy's various transport craft, allowing for easy organization. Command ranks were devised for each of the various unit sizes, but a lot of the time, they weren't used. Even though the Confederacy's battle droids were all independent thinkers, as they like to say, the CIS still made extensive use of central control computers for coordinating large droid armies. Units coordinated by CCCs often didn't have leaders, as it was largely unnecessary. This was especially true for large armies, which rarely bothered with sergeants, lieutenants, or captains. By the time of the Clone Wars, central control computers were no longer a fatal weakness as they had been during the Battle of Naboo. All of the Confederacy's battle droids were able to operate without one, meaning that destroying a CCC would no longer shut down the droid army it was attached to. CCCs were used primarily to coordinate massive numbers of droids, somewhat like Jedi battle meditation, allowing thousands of droids to respond simultaneously as a collective unit. Orders were often relayed directly through central control systems, though a lot of Separatist officers preferred to transmit their commands the good old-fashioned way as well. The droid army was based on a very simple hierarchy. Battle droids answered to droid officers, who answered to organic officers or tactical droids. The specific rank structure of the droid army is largely unclear. Most officers in the CIS were casually referred to by their subordinates as commander. But since there were huge disparities in rank between your average battle droid commander and, say, a Sarge Ventress, we suspect it was mostly used as a vague synonym for officer. This was probably because it didn't really matter. Droids had no use for the complex hierarchies or the pomp and circumstance of organic militaries. They just needed to know who was going to tell them what to shoot at first. Now onto the order of battle itself. The smallest unit of the CIS droid army was the Squad, a unit of 8 droids tasked with completing simple, small-scale objectives. Squads were technically commanded by sergeants, with corporals serving as their seconds in command, but in practice, very few droid squads made use of either command rank, as a lot of the time it simply wasn't needed. Droid sergeants and corporals, when present with a squad, were counted as part of the squad's 8 members, unlike clone sergeants. Above the squad level were the platoon and the company. Platoons contained 7 squads for a total of 56 droids, and they were occasionally led by droid lieutenants. 2 platoons made up a company for a total of 112 droids, plus support units and the commanding officer droid. A company was equivalent to the carrying capacity of the Confederacy's most common troop transport vehicles, the multi-troop transport and the platoon attack craft. In full-scale battles, companies were the smallest units that would operate independently, and when droids marched in blocks, those were usually company formations. 7 companies made up a battalion, a unit of 782 droids led by a droid commander. Battalions were the smallest units equipped with vehicles other than transport craft. Alongside the 7 MTTs, PACs, or other transport vehicles needed to transport the battalion's infantry droids, battalions would include a squadron of 24 armoured assault tanks or equivalent heavy vehicles. But not all droid companies were organised into battalions. Some were organised into units called vanguards, which were essentially larger battalions designed to break through particularly strong defences. Vanguards were made up of 11 companies for a total of 1,232 droids, plus 18 tanks and associated support vehicles, and they too were led by battle droid commanders. 1 vanguard and 4 battalions made up a regiment, which was led by a higher ranking droid commander and included a total of 4,368 droids and 114 tanks. The droid regiment was equivalent to the total carrying capacity of the C-9979 landing craft. In most cases, it was the smallest unit for which the droid commander was swapped out for an organic one or a tactical droid. Above the regiment level, the order of battle became much simpler. 5 regiments made up a division, which was carried into battle by a section of C-9979s, and 5 divisions made up a corps, which was carried by a squadron of 25 C-9979s. Both unit types were commanded by some variety of droid officer, and both were purely logistical in nature. Divisions and corps rarely saw independent use in combat. Divisions contained 21,840 droids plus complement, while corps contained 109,200 droids plus complement. By the time of the Clone Wars, corps were the highest level of organisation at which OOM battle droid commanders were still used as officers. 2 corps made up the largest formal unit within the CIS droid army. The army, the equivalent of the total surface force carried by a Lucrehulk-class battleship. In total, armies contained 218,400 battle droids, 50 C-9979 landing craft, 1,750 MTTs and PACs, 5,700 AATs or the equivalent, and a bunch of support droids and officers. That's not counting reinforcements, mind you. Lucrehulk-class battleships could carry an additional 300 PACs, 550 AATs, and an additional 112,000 battle droids, which were presumably either reserves or stationed for defense on the battleship as part of the CIS Navy. These armies were placed under the command of the battleship's captain. Above the rank of the battleship captain, the army and navy operated under the same structure. There was no official label for groupings larger than the army, as armies were considered sufficient for the conquest of your average planet. In practice, however, the Confederacy ended up deploying multiple armies for individual battles, and in those cases, the combined forces would be commanded by a general. There was no name or formal division for the combined armies that generals commanded, and they could range in size from just a few regular armies to a few dozen regular armies. Those of you who watched our video on the Grand Army of the Republic's organizational system might remember that the GAR had sector armies and systems armies, vast logistical units that helped organize operations across entire theaters. The droid army didn't have any sort of equivalent to this. It did things a little differently. While the Republic had its navy divide itself up according to the needs of the army, the CIS army divided itself according to the needs of its navy. Since CIS ground units were based on the carrying capacity of battleships, it was the CIS navy that handled theater divisions. Armies were divided across naval units instead of the other way around. The largest ground force that any separatist general who wasn't Grievous could command was likely the combined armies of a whole fleet, of which the CIS navy had approximately 100. This does a pretty good job of highlighting the difference in how the Republic and the Confederacy waged war. The Republic was focused on controlling planets. Its objectives were to defend loyalist worlds and capture separatist worlds, and it subordinated everything to its ground forces as a result, as they were ultimately the ones that had the biggest role in holding planets. The Confederacy, on the other hand, was focused on battering the Republic into submission. Thus, it focused on its navy, which was capable of waging war without needing to care about territory. The CIS droid army just wasn't as essential to the separatist war machine as the GAR was to the Republic. So that's our look at the complicated but efficient rank structure of the CIS droid army. But what do you think? Would you like us to do an in-depth look at the CIS or Republic Navy next? Comment with Roger or watch those wrist rockets to indicate your choice below and tell me that you've made it this far into the video. And just before you go to do that comment, make sure you check out our links in the description. We have exciting news as we're opening up a new channel called The Braved, where we dive deep into history of all eras and take a look at some badasses of history. And if you're more into the music side of things, check out our Relax Jack music channel, where we get a lot of the music that we use here for this channel, and you can use some of the music there for your own creative projects as well. And if you just want to join our wider community, check us out on our main Geetsly's Discord, where you can chat to myself and other Star Wars fans, and our Geetsly's gaming network. Anyways guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.